Hey there, my name is Allie Graham, and I am an occupational therapy student at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. This is our Road to Practitioner in-Service series, and today I get to talk to you a little bit about communicating effectively and supporting caregivers. So the reason I chose this topic is when I learned about occupational therapy, I was a senior in high school and my grandfather suffered from a stroke. And my dad was really working diligently to take care of his family, but also take care of his dad, who was in inpatient rehab for about a month. Recovering from his stroke. And so my dad is what you call part of the sandwich generation. He was taking care of his 4 kids at home and also taking care of his aging parents. And so this topic kind of sparked my interest because caregiver education and support is part of my OT origin story. And so I thought it would be a cool thing to look into a little bit more. So our objectives for this lesson, we have 4. First is to identify exactly who is a caregiver. Second, we're going to look and identify the statistical relevance and the vital role that informal caregiving can play in the healthcare system. Third, we'll differentiate between 4 different forms of communication, which I think will sound familiar to you. And then lastly, we will look at and identify specific strategies and different resources we can use to engage and support caregivers as we go on to level 2 fieldwork and then as OT practitioners. So who exactly is a caregiver? If we were in person right now, I would ask people to raise their hands or maybe write on the board what comes to mind when you think of caregiver. And for many of you, it may be a nurse or a doctor or somebody that your family has paid to aid your grandparents in their homes. But those are caregivers, and there's another type of caregiver that we're going to focus on for today, and that is informal caregivers. So that would include like a husband that's taking care of his wife who maybe had a stroke, or maybe that is a daughter who is taking care of her dad who had surgery. Those are the family members, the loved ones, the people very close in a person's life who are taking time to take care of their loved one, to handle their transportation, to handle their care, their medication, and those are people who are unpaid for their services. And so I challenge you today to think about maybe those non-traditional caregivers that you maybe wouldn't typically think of when you think of caregiver, but are going to be the types of people that we get to work with and get to interact with every day. And so some examples of caregivers that we might not initially think of would be maybe an adoptive or a foster parent who may not know the full medical history of the child that they are taking care of. Or maybe that's a family member who's taking care of someone who has a hidden illness such as depression. And so it's really important that we don't assume anything about their knowledge or their understanding of different topics that may come up or things that we're doing. We simply come to them with a humble spirit and have mercy and just want to support and empower them so that when our client leaves the doors of our facility, they have the support and the knowledge that they need to really promote their independence and to help them to be engaged and plugged in the best that they can. So this is an infographic that I'm also including in this week's folder, and there are 2 things that I really want to hit on in this infographic from the National Alliance on Caregiving. The first is that nearly 1 in 5 adults in America are giving unpaid care to an adult with health or functional needs. So that is about 20%, between 19 and 20% of Americans are considered caregivers, and that is a lot of people. And 23% of those Americans say that caregiving has made their health worse. So if you take a step back and think about that, 23% of those people that are providing care have reported that their health is worse. And so it's really important that we make those caregivers feel confident and knowledgeable and really remind them of their importance and their role in the care process, but also their importance and their value in themselves as a whole, so that they take a step back and do some things for themselves and take care of their own health so that they can best take care of others. So next we're going to talk about the 4 forms of communication that you may use in working with caregivers. And I think this will be familiar with most of you, but this is a good refresher, and we'll talk a little bit about the specifics of these forms of communication in the OT process and involving caregivers. So verbal communication is exactly what you think of. Those are those conversations and the words that you are using in talking to a caregiver. And so it's really important that we as occupational therapists use words that are familiar and they are positive and they're not going to be overwhelming to a caregiver. So it's really important that we use short phrases, that we take time and pauses in our speech, and that we don't use words like or not so sure, just those filler words that may leave our caregiver to feel like, I'm not so sure if they know exactly what they're talking about, or I don't really feel confident in what they were saying. And so one thing to keep in mind is that white coat phenomenon. And so we learned about this in our aging class, that the older generation tends to take to heart exactly what that medical profession is saying. So it's really great that they take that as the absolute truth and they believe what we're saying. But we should take pride and we should honor that by being intentional and being very specific in the words that we say. Our nonverbal communication includes those gestures or the body language that we may be doing without even realizing. We may be closed off or have our arms crossed because we're upset with something that is completely unrelated to the client. We may have our brow furrowed if we're a little bit confused, or maybe you're just being kind of fretful if you're anxious about what's going on. One way that we can combat this with caregivers is to do a full body scan before we walk into a room. We should assess our body to make sure that we are open, we are receptive, and we look like we are ready to talk to them and that we truly care, because we are, and we want to make sure that they know that. Other forms of nonverbal communication might include a gentle touch on their arm if they're upset or you're sharing some hard news, shaking their hand to acknowledge that you care about them and that their role is respected and important, and just making eye contact when you have a conversation. Written communication is a huge part of occupational therapy, especially in the recent change of telehealth. So if you think about telehealth and the role of caregivers and therapists, written documentation and communication is huge. So if you think about the patient portals that you'll be filling out, correspondence through chat box or through email, that is all part of written communication. And so we should really be mindful of not using words that are, again, medical jargon. We shouldn't use any type of abbreviation, and we should keep in mind that the average reading level is about 6th to 8th grade. So that's just a good rule of thumb in all of our written documentation, to keep the words and the phrases understandable, as well as accurate, and make sure that you sign and date everything that you're working on. And then visual communication. This is so important for involving caregivers in a home exercise plan, or certain things like wound care, or maybe positions for bed mobility. A caregiver will have a huge role in those different activities or exercises with our clients, and so providing a visual aid is super crucial for things that are just kind of tricky to explain with words. Something like prone sitting, or something like using a straight fist or making a hook in tendon glides. These words may not have as much of an impact as if we use a visual aid. Another example of a visual aid would be a calendar. This is especially important for things like medication management and making sure that they understand that visual reminder of what they're doing and what they're taking and when they're doing it. So some strategies just to wrap up here that you can incorporate these forms of communication are assertiveness training. So just as we teach our clients to advocate for themselves and to ask for help and to clarify if they don't understand, we should really encourage caregivers to do the same. We should encourage them to delegate different tasks, to ask doctors for clarification if they don't understand, and for ask for changes to be made if something is not working out for them. Again, we should really emphasize the importance of self-care and just remind our caregivers that by taking a nap or going for a walk or eating healthy or doing some form of hobby or something that they enjoy doing, they may push back on that and they may be resistant because it feels selfish, but we should remind them that by taking care of themselves, they can better take care of the one that they love. We can connect them to resources. So as I was searching around and getting ready for this, I found some amazing resources. One is called nextstepincare.org. And on that website, it has an A to Z alphabet of just different phrases and words that a caregiver might encounter in a healthcare system, and gives a simple and quick explanation of those, and that's in 4 different languages. Another is Lots of Helping Hands, and that's a website that allows our caregivers to implement those assertiveness strategies and coordinate care with different people. So you can create a calendar, you can create checklists, and send that out to others that want to help and love the person that needs some extra assistance, and they can all pitch in and kind of lessen the load on just one person. Most importantly, we want to acknowledge, affirm, and empower caregivers. And when we do this, we will help them feel confident and able to take care of the ones that they love. And that's extremely important to increase our carryover at home and just truly support our clients as well as the ones that are taking care of them. So I enjoy doing this, and I hope that you learned something. And if you will, please check out the Google form that's in the folder today, and you can fill that out and share a little bit about what you learned. Thank you.